last pod that I did, was about the breaking things into three parts. I think we left off with the final payoff of the last pod was remember three things that'll help you remember. It's much easier to keep it simple. Three is something that everybody can remember. You can break things into 15 parts if you want, but 150, 3,000 pieces, the more complex that it becomes, the more of a brain power it requires. I guess eventually the only animal on the earth that could compete with the technology that we've got today and using computer technology to break things into tiny, tiny fragments of bits of information. You know what animal that would be? It's not human. The octopus. And a question is, now this is a little trivia to break the ice in the talk that I'm about to give you, which is, I want to try to keep it as brief as I can. When I get these episodes of inspiration, it's easier for me to get back to sleep if I just come down and talk to myself. The octopus has 9 brains. 9 brains. Imagine that. 9 different entities living within the same organism. 9 different brains. Excuse me. When divers come down under the water and they approach, or they get anywhere near the octopus, you can actually blend it in with this environment. How in the hell does it do that? We don't know, or at least I don't. I guess the biologist could explain it much better than I could. I just know that when I heard that the octopus has 9 brains, how in the hell do those brains know how to coordinate? Good God, I've got 1 brain and I can barely function on that one. If I had 9 brains, boy, that would be a real fiasco for me. Okay, I had set the alarm for 15 minutes, and now I know where I stand in this talk. I tend to be long-winded. I apologize for that. But nevertheless, let's focus more on that number 3. That's what I'm here to talk about. I met a guy one time. I'm not going to tell you the circumstances behind it, but it was inside of an insane asylum. And I was a young kid at the time, very, very young. Couldn't drive a car or anything. I was just, small. And he approached me in this insane asylum. This is a true story. I hate to admit. And he said, son, what are you in here for? And I said, well, I come from a very dysfunctional family. And my parents have lots of money. I come from the upper income, the middle class, the upper middle class is, I guess what you'd call my folks. He says, how do they get their money? I said, well, they're not rich, mega rich, like some people that we know, the Rockefellers or the multi-billionaires or the people that have maybe a few trillion stashed away in different banks all over the world or what have you. No, we're just hardworking people in the middle class, and my father's been very successful. He was a traveling salesman. He served in the military, and he actually was stationed over overseas, and he was in that, I forget what they call it, when you have a group of ships, an armada. He was in the armada that was grouped together. They had a mission name for it. I don't know what it is. I haven't obtained his records, but I intend on doing that. But anyway, they were told by the United States government back in World War II, we have to take an island close to the mainland of Japan, because we can use that as an airport to lift off our B-52 bombers. Because if the Japanese don't surrender, we're going to have to take drastic measures, and we need a airstrip nearby the mainland. So that was Iwo Jima, and that's the reason that battle was so important. Well, to hear my dad talk about it when I grew up, he would he said that when they were going to the islands, some of the sailors, they provided basically free beer while on board the ship, but it was watered down. I think it was only like 2.5% alcohol. But if you drink enough of it, you can actually get really, really drunk. And some of the soldiers were so drunk on the way out because they knew they were going to die. They were told that. They said, this is a mission that 90% of you are probably not going to return. Just with that mindset, get your wills, get everything in order, write a goodbye letter to your wife, and leave it with us. And if the ones of you that don't come back, we'll have something for your family to show respect, and have a final outgoing. I think they call those funerals. But anyhow, moving through the ocean, Dad said that the boats would rock like this, rock like that, rock like this, and rock like that. And the bow would go up and the stern, and it was always in motion. He said the 4 years that he was in the Navy, he said he stayed absolutely drunk not drunk, but seasick. He said he didn't like to drink while he was on board ship because he'd just have to regurgitate. He said he'd have to clean his stomach out before he got started. But anyway, they're moved, otherwise he'd be regurgitating all over himself. So he tried to keep liquids down, but he would have a lot of dry heaving when all this motion was going on, motion sickness. But the battleships, I don't know if you've ever been on board of a battleship before. They're huge. They're like floating cities. And the quarters are so narrow. When you walk, you have to almost walk sideways like walking through a submarine. But it's a network of rooms and different compartments, and it's like a battleship. I guess it's like a command, aircraft carrier here are that way also. It's not like a command center. And these guns are so big, huge. You could actually go up to the end of the barrel. If you're a thin man, you could crawl down in the barrel itself. I wouldn't want to recommend that you do that if they didn't have the end stopped up, because think of a gun that's as long as all the way across a house. I mean, if your house is, say, 100 feet long, these guns were huge. Well, Japan had the same thing that we did, except even bigger. Their guns could shoot further and longer than our guns, and their people were taught that you have to fight for your soul, and survival is not an issue. It's accomplishing the mission. They were so determined to win that a handful of Japanese were able to hold back. It's almost like the story of the Alamo. We had an entire the might of the United States of America were going against a handful of Japanese that were so dug in you couldn't get them out. When they finally reached the island, the only way they can get them out of those tunnels and fortresses was to burn them out. So they're going toward this island. They can see it in the distance. Well, no, they can't see it in the distance. I don't know how long it is before the horizon curvature would hide the island, but this thing was about the size of, Dad described the Mount Suribachi, which is near the center of the island, is like Stone Mountain. And they had taken their technology and drilled into the side of that mountain, and they had wall thickness of pure steel, as good as ours, maybe better, I don't know, 12 feet thick or some such. And so when we got, our mission was to get only near enough to the island and surround the island with our battleships and keep blasting them into oblivion, and then take the island by bringing in the Marines. Okay. And by the way, my uncle, who was his brother, served in the Marines, but he served in the next war, which was the Korean War. Before they got to the island, before they could even see it, all of a sudden, boom, 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 these huge blasts would blow up near the ships, and they would rock. Even the huge floating armadas would rock because these bullets that the Japs were lobbing over were from these huge guns that they had embedded into the island and opened up these steel doors, huge 12-foot steel doors or what have you. I'm not sure about the measurements or anything. That's not important. They were so big that even the battleships, once they got within shooting range, could not penetrate that fortress. It was just too massive. It'd be like, if you can imagine a bullet as big as a car, weighing 2,000 pounds, 2,000 or 3,000 pounds, a shell that they were able to lob. I think Dad said 50 miles they could shoot these bullets. We didn't have that kind of technology, especially on a boat. You can't carry weaponry that heavy or probably sink the whole ship. So our guns would only reach out 20 miles from the point of in the boat to the island. So they were going along, and before they got to the island, before they even got to within range of the Japanese, they were still drunk sailors, and they were hanging off the edges of the railing. They were just crazy drunk, and some of them, Dad said, fell in the water, and they didn't even try to rescue them. They said, "Well, we don't need this guy. We got a mission, and we cannot stop. It's too important." So they're not going to stop the whole armada to save that one guy. And as the ships went by, the guys waving like, "Oh, they're going to save me. They're not going to leave anybody behind." Well, they did. I don't know how many of those instances took place, but Dad saw one of them in particular. And he looked up and he said, "Hey, man, y'all tell him to come down here and save me." Well, too bad. He just kept going. And then all of a sudden the bombs started going off. This meant that they were within the 50-mile range. And from the time that 50 miles to within 20 miles, what is that, 30 miles that they had to endure of these continuous blasts. And see, the Japanese, they knew where we were because they used planes, in the distance as spotters. And so they were telling these cannons, adjust it, all right, fire. And so they had the ability to beat the hell out of our forces. And this is, we're talking about maybe, 2,000 or 3,000 Japanese against 20,000 Marines that were eventually going to hit that island. Maybe even more, I forget. But Dad said it was like something out of the movies. I mean, it was unbelievable. You see that stuff on special effects on movies now, but back then, you saw the same kind of things on happening, and it was actually real. I don't know if anybody recorded. Well, some of it does. He brought back pictures once they took the island of what they were doing with to get these Japanese out of these holes, and some of them came out like that, and they were smoking on fire, and they were like fried chicken. They're already dead, but they were trying to get away from the flames. He said it was horrible, and he never he embedded some things in his memory that he brought with him to his grave. He said it affected me. He says I'm convinced that this is part of my mental illness, is memories of that horrendous battle at Iwo Jima. So, folks, I guess the point of this talk is, if you get under stress, remember, it's the mission that counts. Sometimes you got to pray for that mission. God, show me the way. You ever heard that? God, show me the way. And once you get it set in your mind what he has in store for you, then it's up to you, working in conjunction with God and other entities, to come up with a strategy to help you achieve that big payoff. So you got mission, you got battle strategy, and you got payoff. And the payoff at Iwo Jima was when they raised that flag. Now let me tell you what they had to do to get there. When they got within 20 miles, by that time, a number of these battleships had already sunk with thousands of people. Up to the, because one of these battleships would probably hold 3,000 or more soldiers. Well, anyway, when you just take that, multiply it times, say 20, that's a lot of people dying before you even get within gun range where we can retaliate. But they did. They were so determined, and they had the, not just the United States, but they had lots of different other countries like UK and anything. Now, I'm not a detailed person, so you can look it up on Google. Okay, the number of countries that went against. Let's see, I think they were called the Allies, and the enemy, the bad guys, they were the Allies, and if I had a Google in front of me, I could tell you all the details. But anyway, good and evil, let's say, which they say is the way battles work. We're the good guys; they're the bad guys. Germany and its allies were known. And I had this problem in my last talk. Sometimes I'll try to search for something I can't remember. Churchill was the name of the guy that from the UK that says never give up. Never give up. He was very mission driven, and the Germans bombed the piss out of UK, but through the leadership of people like Roosevelt and Churchill and some of the great leaders on our side, they kept the people motivated enough to where they could move just like those Argentina ants, where they have a cognizance of oneness, like an organism and a blob, and they were all driven. We're gonna wipe these insects out. They call them jabs back then. And so they got within firing range, and then all of a sudden, Dad said that you could hear the whole ship start to shake. Boom, boom, boom. He says these big ships, when they would fire those guns out, the whole deck would tilt about 15 degrees, and then it would go back. This went on for weeks. I think they bombed Iwo Jima, and finally it had been obliterated. They said nothing could survive what we've just seen. We take one small island, no bigger than a few football fields, pushed together, and you take an entire 1,000 ships around, battleships, and you're just bombing the hell out of it. And we're doing it from 20 miles out, by the way. Okay? We're hitting them, and we continue that barrage. Like I say, I don't know. I'm not a detailed person, so if you're real interested in knowing details about Iwo Jima, you study it. History is something that I think we should never forget, and we should keep our libraries intact and quit trying to tear down statues that tell us about history, and put stuff into books and libraries and retain that knowledge. When one culture takes over another, they want to erase the history of that culture that they're conquering. And I think that's part of the process of wanting to erase anything that has anything to do with what they're trying to destroy, whether it be white bigotry or, because of the color of your skin, or black worthlessness, labeling somebody as really a subhuman, like the Germans did with the Jews. I mean, people are very cruel to one another, and it's a shame. And Christ taught us to love each other and not hate each other to the point where we're trying to wipe each other off the face of the earth. But this is the result of, it's what you call human evolution. We fight to conquer, and we conquer to survive. So finally, after all this barrage, all of a sudden the guns went silent. Now the mission was to take the Marines and put them on these Higgins boats. You've seen it in these war movies. So these boats are long and they have a gate that drops and all the soldiers come out in the water. I think there's a movie with John Hanks. It's called Rescuing. Where they in that movie they were given the mission to bring back a soldier that had a big family, but he was the last of the Mohegans left in his family that was still alive, and he was out there fighting a war. And so Tom Hanks was given the mission: find that man, find his paperwork, and trace it back, and rescue him and bring him home. So was it Rescuing Sergeant Ryan or something? Anyway, to find him, you'd have to use his name, the actor's name, and then look at the movies that he's been in. Boy, my memory's so bad. This is a result of getting older. You get more wisdom, but you can't remember details, and that tends to give it gives you the appearance of being just a rambling old fart. I don't understand what he's saying. What did he say? He said something about the Battle of Iwo Jima. The Battle of Iwo Jima was probably one of the costliest battles, other than maybe the Battle of the Bulge with the Germans. But it made sense a lot more than, to me, Battle of the Bulge did. I mean, why would you want to kill that many people just to take a hill that as soon as you conquer it, you leave it? That's the kind of stuff that was going on in Vietnam. And I think that's part of the reason there was such a rebellion against the war. There was so much craziness going on. Craziness. But in the World War II, and veterans, old-time veterans, refer to that as the big one, the big war. Well, hell, I think all wars are big. But that's I'm getting off on the rabbit trail. Let me get back to the main point. We got the guns to shut up, because nobody's going to want to open that bay door when you got bombs going off around you. But they had people looking through the peepholes, and they could see those Marines. Oh, we're going to get hit by all the Americans now, like Argentina ants, all working in unison. So as the Marines landed, some of them didn't make it, because by that time they had the Japanese opened they had all these guns in place, emplacement guns that were shooting a bullet bigger than a 50 caliber. But anyways, and they had them all around the island. Have you ever seen what a 50 caliber bullet will do to a car? It's a bullet, first of all. It's like a mini cannon. It's a bullet about the size of a carrot, and it's about that long. It's unbelievable. Can you imagine being hit by a 50 caliber bullet? If it hits you anywhere in your body, it'd kill you from shock. If it hits you anywhere in your torso, it'd cut you in half. It wouldn't just blow your leg off. It'd tear your body in half because of the force behind it. That's why I think the snipers that we train in the SEALs, that is their weapon of choice, is 50 caliber from a distance. with a spotter, a big scope. So they get on the island, all these Marines, and they think, well, we beat them. They're not even shooting at us yet. And then they opened up. A lot of these bullets were killing people as they were beginning to get off the Higgins boats. And, a few of them were allowed to enter the island just to give the others the indication, yeah, it's clear, let's go. Bring them in, bring the boys in. So they got on the beaches. They finally landed on the beaches. By that time, lots, probably dozens, maybe hundreds of the water was bloody around the island because the machine guns, were just mowing them down. They had no idea where this stuff was coming from. They could see the sparks from the island. But when you're a Marine and you're in neck high water coming out of the Higgins, some of those guys, they drowned in their own blood in the ocean. But once they got to the on shore, the ones that survived, they had to hide behind these things that they put on the beach to keep the vehicles from coming too close to the island, to land the soldiers. So the soldiers had to endure that. The Marines, that is, at that point, we considered Marines to be our best because they were fearless fighters. How many in here have seen the movie? I'm talking to the audience, of course that doesn't mean anything, it's crazy, and I'm talking to a camera, but how many out there have seen the movie Full Metal Jacket? It's a movie by Stanley Kubrick, and it has battle scenes in that movie that remind me of what my dad used to talk about in Iwo Jima and his experiences there. So they get on the island, they keep bringing, as they bring more Marines in and more Marines in, the guns just keep mowing them down. Then they can't shoot these big guns from the ocean because they kill their own people. These explosions were so big. It was really up to the Marines. And they were very determined, but they paid up dearly for it. We took that island, but at a huge American loss of lives. I think statistically, if I remember correctly, our casualty count, and as far as people actually killed, were in the tens of thousands. The Japanese, to begin with, they only had a handful of people compared to the number of people it took to take that island. Well, we ended up killing all of them, I think. I don't think they took any survivors. These people were such fearless fighters, they would fight to the last man. They were so determined and dedicated to their God, which was the emperor of China. Their leaders were considered gods. They didn't consider human. They considered them brought like from outer space or the aliens or something. They have some kind of crazy, I think they call that religion Shindu, I believe. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's not. They were not acting Christ-like. Trust me on that. They weren't Christians. They were maniacs, willing to strap themselves with bombs and board a small plane and then crash it like a kamikaze. That's what they call those kind of planes. They trained the boys over in Japan. They souped them up on sake, and they give them, honors. And they said, your mission is to kill yourself, but to take as many Americans with you as possible. So that's the attitude. That's the fighting attitude that these Japanese had. They were ferocious. They were not going to back down. And just like the Alamo, we were ferocious also. But, when you got 1,000 Mexicans invading a little Alamo, post, and you've got maybe 50 or 100, Davy Crockett or what have you, they're pioneers that are defending this. It's all about turf. The Mexicans wanted that turf, and they were going to take it, and we were holding them off as long as we could. But they got the Alamo. We had to eventually come back and get it back from them, but at a heavy cost. So we paid a price. But we took that island. But let me tell you what the final step was. They couldn't get those guys out of the main part of the big the mountain, the Mount Suribachi. Those people were dug in. Man, you can't even burn them out because the walls were shut. So what they did was they had to find other tunnels on the island where it was connected up underneath. It would go from underground to up underneath into these massive fortresses that Japan had dug and developed. They had it's amazing how they could tear into a wall and build an actual inside structure, but they did. They were able to do that. And so Dad said he was with a unit, and he was not a Marine. Okay, he was in the Navy, but the Navy and the Marines had to coordinate. And my dad's job was a signalman, and he had to be near enough to the front lines to where he could see what was going on, and then he'd turn around and he would communicate back to the ships about what they needed to adjust their guns or what have you, or bring in the planes from the. I don't know if we had. Yeah, I think we still had some aircraft carriers. Oh, we did have aircraft carriers, because when they bombed Hawaii, that brought Japan into the war, they destroyed a lot of our battleships and a lot of our cruisers, but they didn't get the aircraft carriers because they were at sea. So yeah, they had aircraft carriers, and that was a huge advantage. Probably an aircraft carriers what won World War II, because that enabled us to get close enough. We could launch those fighter planes off in mass, and then they drop bombs. And that's a lot more effective than trying to shoot over the head of a soldier when you could swoop in close and you know exactly where that bomb is going to hit. So they brought in the bombers, and they still couldn't get those Japs out. So here my dad was dug in to the side of a foxhole with near the beach, or actually near the interior of the island. They'd already taken that section, which was only a few football fields, to where he said the island was like powder. If you step on it, have you ever been there? Anybody in here been in Hawaii or near Hawaii or on vacation? I have. When I was in sales, I won numerous contests. I could weave some big tales about my experience in the sales industry. But yeah, I was a professional bullshitter, okay, or some people refer to that as a con artist. But I was good at what I did, and I could sell the pants off anybody in my younger years. Can't do that today because I have to maintain at least an aura of dignity. If you want to know the truth, I'll try to give it to you as best I can, but it's all interwoven with an opinion. So I come across as a know-it-all, and I don't. Trust me. Now my wife does, but she won't admit it. She thinks she has the ability to outwit me every time. She's one of the few people that I've met that are just incredible. She's clairvoyant. That means that she not only knows what you're thinking, she knows everything that's in this room and the next and the next. I mean, she just has this cognition that she knows. She's just all knowing. And she's not a bullshitter. She'll tell you like it is. And it's scary. But I digress. Now we're back on the island. So Americans have taken the island. Mount Hibachi is still there. Strong fortress, Alamo, holding off what they consider the enemy, the Americans. And finally, they were given down the command, take that mountain. We have to get those Japanese. And then so they came up with the idea, what if we pour napalm down those holes? Because even the mountain, they have to have pipes to breathe. And there were, at the top of the mountain, there were some holes. Now, there were Japanese up there defending that area. And they had fortresses as well, so you couldn't bomb those guys out, because when the planes came over, they were just hunkered down, several 10 or 20 feet under in the top part of the mountain. And so we couldn't bomb them out. And until we took the top of the mountain, we couldn't burn them out entirely. Now we could burn out other areas around the mountain that were, where they had their gun emplacements for when we invaded the beaches. But the top of the mountain, oh, by the way, Dad said that he was in a foxhole with a guy, and they were using bodies. There were so many bodies that were dead. They were using them as sandbags on the island. They were stacking them up and then hiding behind them and digging foxholes behind dead bodies. That's how horrendous it was. So Dad spent, I don't know how many days he spent on that island or weeks, but he said he was in a foxhole. You couldn't get up to pee or to take a crap. You just had to do it in your pants because you're in a foxhole with another guy. They teamed up. You had a foxhole buddy. So you had this guy and this guy. And all they cared about was survival, just hunkering down like this, because you couldn't get up to shoot back because they'd blow your head off. So they were just hoping that the bombers and the other people, the support, troop support, would give them enough time to where they could get back out of the foxholes and then charge again. So when they try to do that, these big guns would open up on the side of the mountain, and instead of looking 50 miles out, they just go right down to the beach. And when they would shoot these huge bullets as big as a car, Dad said that you could feel it coming. It was like shake the ground when it hit. You didn't know where it hit, but you could hear it. And he says it just about knocked his hearing out on both sides. He said he was so scared. The guy that was in the hole with him that night, he heard the guy mumbling, and Dad said, "Hey, fella, what are you doing? Are you okay?" And he was mumbling. And Dad looked over and reached, kind of filled in because it was dark. They wouldn't let you put any lights on because you give away your position. But he talked to the guy. He said, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm doing the rosary bead. I'm a Catholic." He says, "Rosary beads? What are that?" "Well, what's a rosary bead?" And the guy said, "It's a necklace with these beads, and as you say prayers, you flip around each bead." And my father said, "Give me that damn thing." He pulled it off his neck, put it around his own neck, and started praying. "Oh, Jesus, help me. God, help me." God and Father, the Son. Anyway, it's kind of funny. He could tell the story a lot better than I am. I've got a little bit of his voice on tape that I can play for you, but not now. That's for another time. Like I say, I want to go back down because my father passed away fairly recently. He was in his mid-90s, but he had already been to the doctor, and they estimated he would have lived way over 100 if he had not caught his respiratory disease. I think it was COVID. That was before they knew what COVID was. And so, when the COVID hit, that was about the time that he died. So it had to be COVID. He was old and frail, but he was still out there playing golf and trying to stay in shape as best he could. And he had a good-looking body for an old man. But he was frail. As you get older, your body breaks down just like everything else in life. Cars break down, our bodies break down. That's why you have to revert back to, what's important to me today? Is it the 3 rules of a mission to make the world a better place? Or is it my mission to just, what are those 3 things that I said earlier? On my last pod meeting, first of all, you never fall down, never pass up a restroom. This is how I build my life because I'm getting old. Never trust a fart. Well, the Americans had to trust their fart. Come hell or high water. Their mission was to take that island. Do whatever is necessary. Never give up. Remember the words of Churchill? Never give up. Never. And so they continued relentlessly, bringing on more and more soldiers. And I think finally the body count And I'm going to tell you, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know what the hell I'm talking about except for what I heard from my father. I would estimate that the death count on our side was probably close to 20,000, whereas the Japanese suffered nowhere near that. They didn't have that many people, but what they had was so fortified, it was just hard to get to the living creatures that were raining down hell on our boys. But we did. And the way we did it was with napalm. We had to actually take the outside of the island and clean out all the roaches from the tunnels that went under and up. But I don't know if they sent anybody into those tunnels or not. They may have. Because some of these people say, I'm going to get them. I don't care. If you see your buddy that you spent a year with, and all of a sudden a shell comes and cuts him in half, you don't think that's going to do something to you? It made the hatred of that enemy so great that they were determined, look, we're going to give them back some of their own medicine. Come on, boys, let's get them. And so they risked their lives because they knew, they were told early on, 90% of you ain't going to make it. So don't have, get your affairs in order. And when they took the napalm and coated the island like coating a beehive on honey, and let's say setting it on fire, which is what napalm does. What is napalm anyway? It's gasoline mixed with detergent, is it? Anyway, you throw it out like a flamethrower, but if it gets on you, it just keeps burning it, and it won't stop burning. So by putting enough napalm down these pipes and their air holes, they were, and then of course as they poured down, it was on fire at that time, and they just keep pouring it down, and so they filled up this inner chamber with toxic fumes, and you can't breathe. They burned them out. And by the time that they went in and dug into that mountain, bulldozer, backhoes, or whatever, to make sure they got all the roaches out of the ground. Roaches, referring to the enemy, the Japs, they call them. They found a lot of them down in the tunnels, and they had killed themselves because they knew that was the Americans were fixing to take them. And they were told by their emperor, don't let them take you alive. If they get to within killing range and you're surrounded by 100 Americans, this is what you do. And they had a ritualistic ceremony. They call that, and it's suicide, but there's a name for it. I forget what it is. It's called, it's where you take a knife about that long and you disembowel yourself or cut your own throat or whatever. Anyway, a lot of them have these what's referred to as samurais, these long swords. He brought back some of this stuff. My father did. He brought back a Japanese rifle and samurai sword, and when I was little, and we went out and shot that gun. I didn't shoot it, he did. And it had the closest thing to a 50 caliber I've seen. It's a skinnier bullet, but it's just as long as a 50 caliber. I forget what they call it, but Dad was saying that they claim that bullet will go far enough out to sea to where they could actually shoot from the island with these rifles. And they hit the boats, and you could hear them pinging, ping, 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 ping. And of course, they were just trying to hit the boat itself, and with numbers of shots that they were firing off. And occasionally you'd hear a guy scream, ah! Maybe his head was missing or something, I don't know. But being hit, once again, by a bullet that size, all it takes is one shot, you're dead. But they were shooting from a distance. Up close, Dad said that these guns, when they shot the Marine, it would put a little hole in the front, and the whole backside of his body would be blown out from the force. So, of course, one shot, that's it. So I've got, that's part of my family heirloom, is that samurai sword and that Japanese rifle. I think I was able to find the bullets at a gun show that they're very, very, very hard to find. I think I've got like 4 bullets, that's it. So, of course, I'm not going to shoot my last remaining 4 shells, but the gun is still functional. It's a bolt action, and it looks a lot like the 50 caliber that I've seen in gun shows. The ones that we have, which are probably better weapons today than anything the Japanese had back, 50 years ago in World War II. Okay, so the last remaining part of that battle was when they raised the flag, and my father was there when it happened. He wasn't obviously one of the ones that raised the flag, but he saw it because they had destroyed all of the Japanese, and it was time. They had a few holdouts that were picked off. Like, if you kill a nest of bees, there'll always be that one bee out there that gets away, but he'll come back and try to sting you, and you just gotta have a fly swatter ready for him. That's what they did with the Japs. They were having these big beer parties and barbecuing or whatever they do for a celebration, and all of a sudden, somebody would say, "Oh, there's one." So they could smell our food, and they were starving to death. They didn't have anything, so they were trying to stay alive, and they just say, "Oh, he's." And he saw a guy just pull a 45 out and said, "Here, I'll get him." Kill the guy. So they weren't really putting up a defense. They were trying to fulfill a mission, which was to hold the Americans off until the last man, and that's what they did. Their mission, they accomplished it. They delayed the inevitable, which was take the island of Iwo Jima. Take it. That's our mission. Build the airfield, which they brought in the engineers, and they built this airstrip, and then bring in the bombers and land and get ready to invade the mainland of China. Well, to make a long story short, my father survived that battle, and he's brought back memories with him. Up until recently, I could hear he would tell me those stories. But as a child growing up, I actually got to see the gun that he had and the bullet, and I watched him fire it. And he hit a tree that was about this big around, if you can see that, big like maple tree, and the bullet just went right through it. No problem, no problemo. So that's a lot of wood. That's equal to some steel. I say wood is one of the strongest materials there is for its weight. If you take a 10-pound piece of wood, hardwood, and put it up against 10 pounds of steel will not stand a chance. The wood would keep a shell out much better than the steel would. Steel might be that thick. Okay, 50 cal go right through that. A tree is a lot bigger, but it's lighter weight than steel. And so, anyway, I don't want to get into the rabbit trail about steel versus wood. What I would like to do is leave you with a mustard grain of knowledge that you can take with you. And that is this. Remember, and we talked about this earlier, religion is mankind's pathetic attempt to explain away the unexplainable. Now think about that for a minute. We can't explain who God is. No one can. But we can feel his presence. And he gave his only begotten Son, for who shall ever believe in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. Now let's take that statement and break it down into the purpose, the process, and the payoff. The purpose is you were put on this earth for a mission. Your destiny is what we call your purpose. You have to discover what your destiny is. If your destiny is to be a cook working at McDonald's, You be the best damn cook you possibly can. If your destiny is to wait tables, you want to wait them and try to do the best job that you possibly can. Trust me, it's not about money. It's about the mission. Because working in orchestrations, and I remember this growing up when I got my first job, not waiting tables, but working with other kids, but we were all trying to do the same thing that the boss man told us to do. That was very rewarding. I think one of the earliest experiences I can remember was when I was in the Boy Scouts. We were kind of like a mini army, we were going to go out and camp out and that kind of thing. I only got to do it one time, I think. My dad didn't like having to, he took me around. He's not a woodsman at all. He does not like camping out, never has. He always said after the Navy, he never would get on another boat. Based on his experience, I can understand why, from the memories of being seasick. So your purpose is to discover what your destiny is. And then the middle part, which is number 2 portion, is to come up with a strategy, what some refer to as process. And I've heard, a lot of you have heard these kind of things before. It's a simplistic way of explaining things. To me, it's so much easier if you break it down into things that you can remember. Purpose, process, payoff. There's a company out there, I'm not going to mention the name, that taught this to me in sales training, and that's what they build their whole mission statement on, its purpose. We have a purpose in this world, and we're going to come up with a strategy to reach our payoff. And if you can do that in your own life, build a strategy based on all the knowledge that you can put together and network with as many friends that are what do you call it, sane-minded. Remember, Charles Payne put it the best way I've ever heard it in his book. Ultimate wisdom is the ability of a group of people. They don't have to be the same. I mean, they don't have to be completely zombied out to think exactly the same like machines. But they have a purpose that pulls them together into a oneness. And through that oneness, they share ideas, they network. And as that group becomes larger and larger and larger, it becomes an army, a movement. And now you have something that can get, the bigger that their strategy is and the more effective that it agrees the axles, the bigger the payoff. Now, I think it ties into politics. I don't want to get into politics today. That's not what I came here to do. Today, I'm just giving you a snippet of how the process works. A process that is so simple, it's like falling off a rock. So what did Charles Payne mean when he said ultimate wisdom is the ability of a group of people, a large crowd, working in unison. Unison. It's the military. The most organized people in the world are like militaristic. They are taught. Here again, see that movie, Full Metal Jacket. Order, Charles Payne. I imagine you could get Full Metal Jacket off Netflix, but it is a must-see movie. This is the closest thing to reality. This is the closest thing to the real world as you're ever going to get, as far as the training that the soldiers are being put through to get them ready to become professional killers. Because that's what you do. When you're a soldier, you're professional. And you know how to kill. And you do it as a group. But you do it effectively. To where, the payoff is just about guaranteed. Bringing in, if the group is large enough, against a smaller group. So kind of ring the bell, a bigger group invading a smaller group. Yeah. Blue and yellow, the flag. Ukraine. What a mess. Putting somebody in charge of something like that, what a mess. You got to pick the right person. That's one of the keys. If that person doesn't seem to know what he's doing, he's not going to maintain the confidence of his followers. That's all I can tell you, Biden. I mean, I'm rooting for doing the right thing. I understand. I believe in my own mind. I believe what it must feel like to be black and be discriminated against. But I also know what it was in the military. When I was in the military, we didn't think about black and white. We thought about an American. Didn't have a damn thing to do with your skin color. You were an American. All we looked at was that rank, the rank on the shoulder. When the colonel came into the room, everybody had to come to attention because it was the rank count. And when the general came on campus, on the post, everybody had to. It's almost like bowing down to the emperor. Yes, sir. And you hold your salute until he passes, and then you can put your arm down. But you have to hold the respect of a salute. It's very important to maintain that discipline. And who was the guy in Full Metal Jacket? Sergeant Ernie. He was the most realistic drill sergeant I've ever seen, and he's in that movie, Full Metal Jacket. But you can get Charles's book for free. Now you do have to pay for shipping and handling, but it's menial compared to what if you bought the regular hard copy book, and it's practically free. You don't have to pay that much, just a few dollars. Instead of paying $25, you pay chump change to get it mailed to you. But he's promoting his book. He's an author of several other books out there. And Charles Payne is one of my favorite authors. Unstoppable Prosperity is the name of one of his latest books. And he's given that one away for free. This guy's multi-millionaire. I imagine he doesn't really need to make a profit, but he wants to spread the gospel of things that he has developed in his own philosophy, which is good. Good. I would love to meet this guy. I'd like to have his autograph. I think that we need more people like him in this world that are more interested in helping others than simply thinking about themselves. That's the problem with the world. Self-centered selfishness. And hero worship, I might add. It's kind of scary how you can get a lot of people invading the very government that provides freedom for them because you have a charismatic leader that is so powerful that even after he gets out of office, they're still trying to impeach him. They want to impeach him again and again and again. It's because he has a lot of power. He knows how to talk to people. He knows how to influence. I don't have that advantage. I barely stand 5 feet tall. I'm short. I can leave you with some funny things to investigate. If you want to find a real funny person to listen to that used to be on the air with WSB, check out David Paul. You can Google it, Off the Wall with David Paul, and you can play that on your YouTube player. Google will direct you to the correct YouTube, or you can go to YouTube and use the search bar, Off the Wall with David Paul. Check it out. It's funny as hell. So let's get back to the religion for just a moment. And we talked about this in our last session. Religion is the evolution of mankind's pathetic ability to explain away the unexplainable. Now, what if I told you that if I had the right mind power, I could put these glasses on the table and I could focus and actually make a move? They've got people like that living on the earth now. It's called psychokinetic energy. Scientists are studying uh, psychic phenomena. They don't understand it, how the mind has so much electricity and so much power, untapped power, I might add. I've heard for years that we all operate at about 5% of our potential. So you got 95% of your mind that's just sitting there not being used. So if you can learn to tap into that, to that great wealth of ability, there's no telling. First of all, if we were able to operate at a, let's say, a 50 or 60% level of ability with the power of the mind, we could all read one another's thoughts. There wouldn't be any more hiding from the police, for doing a crime. We would know where you are and know where to come to get you because we can read your mind. It's kind of scary, isn't it? So no one would have secrets in a transparent world of that. And that's where we're headed. I believe, and this is just my personal belief, bullshit philosophy, I believe that one day we will finally reach what the Hindus refer to as Parinkshanti. Parinkshanti, and here again, religions are famous for breaking things into three parts. Parinkshanti, you have Shiva, which is like God, the equivalent of God, to their God I'm talking about. Then you have another God, I forget his name. Karma was another one. And he would be like the Christ-like figure that was the love and the power came from Shiva. And there was another one I think was the representative of evil or something. Or, I don't know. The one that they can't seem to understand. Listen, I'm not a Hindu, okay? But I've been in their temples and I've seen those idols. It's not idol worship. Look, we've got crosses at the Roman, the Catholic Church has built shrines where it looks like they're worshiping an idol. It's a statue of Jesus, and they're falling down at their knees and worshiping. It's the representation of what this statue represents, which is Christ. And being that some of their religions are almost exactly like Christianity, it's just, to me, that tells me that maybe religion is an evolution of mankind's searching for God. Well, an old man named Dave Freeman, one of my father's friends, he was a deep thinker, but he only had about a third grade education. And whereas my father, went through college and he was pretty smart. He got a degree to show it. Before he passed away, he has a lot of sales awards, won numerous awards. I've got a lot of that in my bloodline, but I'll tell you one other thing. His dad before him was a leader. He was the founder of the Church of God, he and Ray Hughes. Urias Dolphus Tidwell Sr. and Reverend Hughes, Ray Hughes. And Ray Hughes is on the internet. By the way, he was a famous evangelist for the Church of God. They founded the Church of God. So there's a lot of that runs in my bloodline. And so I hate to see myself go to waste doing nothing. I'm retired from the insurance industry. My wife and I used to own an agency on Beaufort Highway. I don't want to go to my grave just watching Leave It to Beaver reruns and Father Knows Best, Jack Benny, all the stuff that you see on TV, or being a couch potato, or becoming an alcoholic, or what have you. I want to have purpose in my life. I want to do something where I can feel like I'm benefiting society. This is the kind of thing I try to teach my son before he struck out on his own. Now today, it's called the Atlanta Blockchain. He owns that organization. I always tell people he owns Atlanta Blockchain. He says, "Oh my God, I've heard of that." Well, have you ever heard of Datacom? Datacom, well, isn't that big corporation that makes paper? I said, I used to own that. Nobody believes me, but it's true. I did. I incorporated. I sold that name years and years ago because I was just one guy coming up with some ideas, harebrained ideas. I've also tried to patent things before. None of them worked. So I finally gave up. I said, what in the hell can I do? And then I decided, what does my daddy do? My daddy does the same thing that I did for 30 years working in the insurance business, and that's bullshitting people into buying his product, painting a picture that made it so attractive that they decided, even if they got to pay more money than they pay the competitor, they're going to deal with Bud. That's the name that he went by, because Urias Dolphus is not the prettiest name in the world, so he came up with the nickname Bud Tidwell. And so that's my daddy. I'm proud of him. But just like every other family in the world, every family has its dysfunctionality. Now, I'm not up here to talk about dirty underwear or crack jokes about it like, Daddy, what's a queer? Shut up, son, keep sucking. And there's just certain secrets that a family carries with it that you don't want to air. It's like the man who went down to the altar and said, Brother Tidwell, I want us to confess. He says, well, tell me what you want to confess. Bring it down. And so, man said, I was, working on the farm, and I saw it, and he made the man, he said, turn around and tell that to the audience. And so he stood up and said, I was working on the farm, and, one day I kind of gets a little horny, and I saw this pretty old sheep out in the pasture. And I led that, and the preacher said, hey. I don't believe I'd have told that one, brother. Well, there's a lot of things that people don't even want to hear. It's too disgusting. There's a lot of things that goes on within families that's just too disgusting to talk about. So I'm not here to rub my nose or try to remember bad things that have happened to me in my past. And you shouldn't do it with yours either. Just don't worry about it. You're not the only one that's had problems. Some people have had it a lot worse than we have. Think about the poor child that's born in Harlem he's born into an environment where he has no daddy, a mama who's on welfare, and the only way she can afford to put food on the table for those 7 or 8 kids, black children, would be maybe to prostitute herself out, or because, working as a maid, you don't make enough money. But pulling tricks, you can. Or maybe she becomes, as a result of that, becomes a drug addict and ends up dead with those kids left out to roam the streets. They have got no parents. I mean, what do you expect? What do you freaking expect? If you release human beings on the street and they're young, they're going to form gangs. Like-minded people are going to clump with other mind, and then you have some problems because they have to make up their own rules and their own laws, and they call it turf wars. When you go into certain areas of South Atlanta, Perry Homes is one area I would never go in. You're liable to be shot because you're not welcome there. Whitey is not welcome. This is our turf, and they fight among themselves to maintain that turf. Okay, so you can't outlaw cars, but you can use it as a weapon. If there's a parade of people walking down the street, and some idiot comes with his pickup truck or his any kind of car and mows down that and kills as many people as he can, he's using that car as a weapon. Well, that's, in my opinion, why you should not outlaw guns. You need guns in a society to maintain law and order. If you remove the guns, here's what's going to happen. The only people that will be left with guns will be the criminals. So you got to get enough people together with a little common sense to where they can coordinate with local sheriff's department or form militia to guard their own families. If you can't depend on the police to be there in time, and you got somebody coming through your door, maybe 12 or 13 thugs, and it doesn't matter what color they are. They could be Muslim, they could, white, black. It doesn't matter. They're thugs. They're there to loot and kill anything inside your house. You have to have a gun to defend yourself. It's important. It's one of our basic rights. That's why it's written into the Constitution itself. The people that put our Constitution together, they studied that very deeply before they proclamated it. And they used to meet in bars and over their mugs of beer. They talk about politics. This is when the UK owned the United States. We were a colony over here, and the people finally got so fed up with having to deal with the UK that they decided to have a little party. It was called the Boston Tea Party. They just quit paying. They didn't like the tax that the British kept putting on everybody. And tax is the biggest reason there may be a big revolution, not just in America, but worldwide. People don't like losing their freedom. But you have to have a certain degree of willingness to give up enough freedom to where someone can organize and keep the system going. And we've got a great system over here. And we're tearing our own cities down and burning our own buildings because someone behind the curtain, we don't know who it is. I suspect I know who it is, but that's just my opinion. You know what they say about opinions, no two are alike. The powers to be are controlling us right now. We think that we're free, we're not. Let me tell you why. You can vote the guy with the orange hair into office if you want to, but if he loses that election, then he has the right to point out our shortcomings and build a picture with the support of the media. You know, the news that you hear, that's all you hear is what they believe. Everything's got an agenda. It's all a scam. So the powers to be that own 90% of the income, they're the 1% at the top of the pyramid. Remember, we talked about this in our previous session. You got all the little Indians, you, me, and everybody that's working to keep that pyramid lifted so that the people at the top, they get it all, and they're just sitting back enjoying it. You know, they must be aliens, is all I can say. Because it's an ingenious way to control ant populations, us being ants, for them to be their slave labor. Maybe we were created by them. Who knows? Created by them through genetic engineering in order to mine their fields or to do at their bidding what they want done. And we cannot win against alien intelligence. They're so far advanced to us. So far. All we can do is try to understand what the inevitable is going to end up being. And in the Bible, that says that Christ will return. My grandfather had a rug a lot longer than this one. It had this areas, the steps of between now and the end of the world. Well, the thing is, my friend, this may have happened over and over and over. You know that the earth itself is 4 billion years old. And recorded history only goes back about 10,000, or maybe not, no, only a couple of thousand. That's a fragment of proof has been shown, digging down dinosaur bones or what have you. There been Neanderthals and other human-like species. So we may be replaced by another coming species or hybrids where they merge our DNA with their DNA and to become superhuman. Where if they want to move those glasses, and just move them. Or maybe even the next step up from that is they're experimenting with something that's called quantum mechanics, where they take dark energy, and dark energy is out there. It's all around us, but nobody seems to understand it except the geeks, the people that work in that field. But with a certain element, they can take an object and actually make it levitate. Think about that. I saw it on YouTube, I'm telling you. They've got an object that they put a speaker to up here, and it focuses noise until the point where it reaches the frequency of this object. If it's I think that they were doing it with a ping pong ball, but they said it could be redone with anything. What about that guy down in Florida that has that castle that you can go to? I think it's St. Petersburg or something like that. I forget, but anyway, he has these stones that are huge, and he did it. He built this thing himself. And they asked him, "How did you do this?" And he wouldn't tell anybody. He took it to the grave with him. But somebody said that they saw one day from a distance, they saw a tripod with something hovering over another object, and they don't know what he was doing, but he could have been doing this noise. And remember in Ezekiel, the horns. Remember I said you remember. You probably haven't read the Bible the way I have, but there's a chapter in Ezekiel about the Jewish population that was led eventually out of the bondage of the Philistines. They were marching around something called Jericho, and they had horns, and they also carried behind them something known as the Ark of Covenant with God. They don't know what that ark is. They have never been able to find it. They can't even find the Holy Grail, and that was something that was where the blood of Christ was spilled into. It was caught in a cup, like a gold cup, chalice, the Holy Grail. It's supposed to have a lot of significance, but no, of course, nobody can ever find it. So a lot of people attribute it to a bunch of wives' tales. But listen, there's a lot of truth that we know about that has been mythicized. Oh, well, that's just a myth or folklore. No, it's not. Where there's smoke, there's fire. So anyway, I'm starting to meander. I'm going to end this talk right now because I ramble. I really do. I ramble. Reminds me of that song on Raw. Ha! Rolling, rolling, rolling. We know something for sure. Leave you one nugget of thought. Of course, I know you already know all this shit, but I'm gonna say it to you anyway. You need to be reminded of it. You were put on this earth for a reason. You have to discover what your destiny is, and never, never give up. And I'll end this by saying, this is me personally. You can pray to God and things will happen. You see this ring? When I was young, when I say young, I mean about 30 years ago when Michael was little. Actually, more like 20 years ago, because he was about 10 years of age or something like that. I was playing golf with some of my buddies and I lost my wedding ring on the golf course. Now, what's the likelihood that anybody would find a gold wedding ring on a golf course? I mean, that's a big area. But I came home and I was upset, and I told Janet, I said, honey, I've lost my ring. She says, how did you lose your ring? She kind of went into a bit of a hissy. How did it happen? I said, well, I was hitting I was swinging the club, and this thing kept pinching my skin, so I took it and put it in my back pocket. And she said, you stupid, don't you know that would slip out of your pocket? Why didn't you put it in one of your zipper things on the back? I said, listen, it's 20/20 hindsight, it's already done. It's gone, okay? I'll go buy another ring. She said, it's not the same thing. She said, this ring represents our marriage. Love, honor, and obey. And I've told you. I said, you're not my boss. Anyway, love, honor, and obey is what the foundation of marriage is. In my opinion, it's 50-50, really. You can't live with them. You can't live without them. It's a balance. Taking the good with the bad. But bringing that together and building a family is what life, to me, is all about. How far outweighs money. Some of the richest people in the world are also the most miserable. Because as soon as you get the money built up, then you have all these army ants, Argentina ants, coming to get a piece of your pie. So you spend the rest of your life defending something that's worthless pieces of paper. It's only valuable because people put a value in it. Fort Knox doesn't have any gold in it. It's not a gold back. It was at one time, but not anymore. It's gotten too out of hand. When the budget has reached $30 trillion in debt, that's money that they printed, that they used to buy things with, and now they got to pay it back. And they don't have the money to pay it back, so they have to keep printing more. And more money that they print, the less the dollar's worth. So what do you do in a case like that? Well, you got two options. Gold is probably going to be, it's going to hold its value better than anything. But I see a newer technology that's coming up through the pikes. And you're going to hate me when I say this. But remember, societies value certain things, and the more value that they put on it, the more it's worth. Think about it. You can take a rock and you say, this rock has value, and people look at it like you're crazy. But if you could convince enough people that that rock is worth money, then eventually somebody would come along and say, hey, I tell you what, I'll pay you $1,000 for that rock. And you say, okay, but it's the last one I've got. I have to go out and look for another one. Maybe I'll be able to someday replace it. So a con artist can build an economy. Anything can be an economy if other people see it as value. I see this, I'm going to say next, it's going to really astonish you, but I'm probably not, because I'm so crazy anyway. Crazy in the head. Bitcoin. If I was going to choose something to add value, I would say Bitcoin. Number one, you can monitor it if you want to. Secondly, you don't have to monitor it. You can transmit from one wallet to another electronically through something called Lightning. It's almost impossible to unencrypt. If everybody in the world started using Bitcoin as a measure of an economy, they'd never go back to paper money. Never. Because it's so much more efficient. Plus, you don't have to pay taxes or anything like that on it. And that's why governments, including the United States, Russia hates Bitcoin, Soviet Union hates Bitcoin, China hates Bitcoin. We despise Bitcoin in this country. I'm talking about the powers to be. And the reason is because if everybody started using it, it would challenge their authority. You see, every dollar has a serial number on it, and they can trace that paper trail back. You ever heard the expression tracing the paper trail? They can trace it back to the criminals eventually. But with this new product that the United States is coming out with, is CBDC, that's central bank digital currency. It's the same thing as Bitcoin, except the government owns that, and they give it to you based on what they want to do. And once you've had accepted their mark of the beast, if you want to call it that, then they own you. Because if you do anything that they don't want, they don't have to do this. They just turn your currency off. They control it. It's totally controlled. They know where you are 24/7. They can monitor your movements with your smartphone, even if it's turned off. Plus, what good is being out there without any money? You have to have a smartphone in order to make payments. So CBDC is going to take over the world. We may be the last of the holdouts, the last of the Mohegans, but it's coming. Trust me on that. It's coming. Bitcoin has a bad reputation for the same reason the internet for years had a bad reputation. Porn, or some nefarious means. In other words, somebody can come in, hack your computer system, and then transmit a message to you saying this is ransomware. Your computers have been affected. When the airports were shut down in the southeast for about 2 or 3 days, and they couldn't figure out how to fix it, and then all of a sudden the message came in and ran somewhere. Well, they won't accept money. They don't want gold. They don't want paper money. They want Bitcoin, and that's what we had to pay them off to get those computers unlocked. So it's a very convenient tool. Think about it. So are guns. Guns are a convenient tool. It's a tool. Now, who developed Bitcoin? I think I've talked about this before, but it was Satoshi Nakamoto, I think was the name of And everybody said, well, that must be Japanese. Well, it might be, but we don't know. To this day, we still don't know who invented Bitcoin. You know why we don't know? Because the person or the entity or the alien that created this technology would never, ever expose who he is or she, he or she. You know, women, I think, are smarter than men. God could be a woman as far as I know. But she is the ruler of China. Think about that. How words sound the same. Small world, but it has nothing. It's just mnemonics or something. Where words sound. People that, you know, you can get so far into numerology and things where it shows patterns that the computers can analyze. And I think this has something to do with clairvoyance. Some people have the ability to look around and they say, okay, now see how this is laid out. You know, my best guesstimation is they probably got the next door down here organized and say, in other words, they're watching and they're absorbing their environment. That's an amazing ability. I'm going to try to get back out of this rabbit trail and get back to my main talk, because I promised you 15 minutes ago I was going to end this talk, and I'm trying to end it, but I just can't help. But I love to hear myself talk because it helps me. Keep in mind, this is a one take. I have not rehearsed this at all. This is just something I came up with in my head because I couldn't sleep. I have what's known as a sleep disorder, and I get that way when I get stressed. And believe me, I have been very, very stressed lately. I took on a new job, working the hours of 7 to 11, 7 days a week, and that will burn your butt out. And I got to do that for 1 year to get through this training. I've only told one person outside of this family where I work, and I regret that because the cat's out of the bag. But I know, and I'm going to go finish this program, and then I'm going to sit back and say, you know, I got through it. Now what am I going to do with all this knowledge? And my purpose is to serve God. I want to do what's right. I want to help others. But I don't want to do it in such a way where I'm showboating or I'm on a stage, because I will never, ever, ever live up to my standards, ever. So how can I expect you? But what I can do is say, you know, if you look to Jesus as a role model, listen to his teachings, read the Bible, it will make your heart melt. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Who shall ever believe in him shall not perish in this world, but have everlasting life. Now listen, that concept has been with us way before Christianity. It was just so advanced. Everything runs in cycles. Like Voltaire said, it's a never-ending cycle. How far back do we go? 1 billion years? Maybe aliens were us. Maybe, who knows? It's the unexplained. Listen to William Shatner on Ancient Aliens. I love that show, Ancient Aliens. If you haven't seen it, it's a must. It opens your minds to the possibilities of we don't know what this is. What are ghosts? How can something like a poltergeist move objects around a room, actually levitate? What the hell is going on? I don't know, and I don't care, and I don't want to challenge it. Whatever it is, it's something to respect. If I see an object moving in a room, I had nothing to do with it, I want to keep my distance. I'm not going to go toward it, I'm going to go away from it. Assuming that you want to do and become a better person than you were yesterday, I would suggest that you do find a religion that you can believe in, study it, and try to live by its principles. That will give you enough structure to where at least you've got something. And like Dave Freeman used to tell me, growing up, he was one of my father's best friends. He says, David, he says, it's better to believe in something than nothing. And here, Dave had a 3rd grade education, yet he had a job where he competed with my dad as one of the most successful salesman in his organization. My dad was always winning awards, same way I have. It's just in the blood. You feel driven to do what you do. And my father was really good at it. I'm not bad myself. I've been very successful. And Janet has that ability as well. So we, as a team, we were unbeatable. Just the two of us could have run that agency. But it's nice having a staff that you can delegate things to. And tell them to type this letter. And I never learned how to type. To this day, I have to hunt and peck. It's ridiculous. My son can type so fast he fills up a screen in no time. He's one of the geeks, the IT geeks. He's working on game development. But so why haven't you turned off your video yet? What's in it for you? Why haven't you walked away from your YouTube or whatever podcast I'm gonna put this on and say, this guy, he's got some good ideas, but he just rambles. It's hard for me to understand. His monotone voice puts me to sleep. I'm sorry. That's just me. So, I'm kissing you goodbye. This is the end of this pod meeting. And I'll say it like Paul Harvey used to say it. Good day.